Чё вы сидите все как это, в рот все взяли воды? Вот вопрос.
Хотелось бы узнать про работу в Олимпийском, то есть подготовка, как считали, на что опирались. Ну, наша любимая площадка страны была, да, была.
So,
Вот, там Майер так делал, остальные так делали. Но вот интересно, как они делали на плейсибо.
so interesting the questions. Olympiski is not exist anymore because
Right.
another people buy them and planning to destroy it.
Oh,
Yep.
that's a shame.
So finita la commedia. uh, so the people asking is very interesting will be to know how you calculate Olympiski because a lot of people work there and know how difficult is work there for different reason.
Sure.
But the question is, how you do your job as a system engineer for Placebo, for example, on Olympiski? How you calculate the system? How many you need?
Sure. So, for instance, let's take placebo as an example. You're not going to be dropped you're not going to wake up one day and then, oh, I'm on tour. You'll know weeks, months ahead that you're going to certain venues and you're going to be in certain venues on certain days. And you've got a pretty good idea of what you need, but firstly, it would start with speaking to the front of house engineer and knowing what they want to achieve, because some people have very different ideas of what they want. So we want to try and achieve that. You then look at getting all the 3D models of all the venues on the tour. Typically, what I would do is you can't start designing all of them at once because it would take too long. If you're away for several months doing, venue, day off, venue, day off, it would to get that amount of information would be quite tricky. So what you do is you would approach the production manager and find out two things. The first thing you'd find out is how have you been selling tickets? Are the tickets sold up to 180 degrees, so the downstage edge, or are they open up further round? And then secondly, arenas this is, what is their scenery-wise, video screens or scenery? Because if you've got video screens at the side of the stage, you might need to do something different with your side hang. If there's people sat very high up on the side and depending on where the screens are, you might need another hang. So you've got your main hangs doing most of the audience. You've got your side hangs or your aux hangs doing, another massive part of the audience. And then you might have a little 270 hang. So you need to sort of know what the ticket sales are and what they're expected to be. And at that point in time, you need to really firm this up with the production manager. You need to sort of, in a friendly way, let them know that the information you're getting at this stage is quite crucial to how you plan the tour. And if things change drastically, yes, you can open up, a few more rows of seats. You can move the side hangs a bit more upstage and open up some more seats. But if we're doing big changes, then we need to start, and we find out on the day, we need to really know in advance because we might need to get some local PA to cover the extra bits. So once we know coverage-wise what we're selling, we'll then look at, you'll go through and you'll know because you'll have been to most of these venues before. You're not going to, the first time you go and do an arena tour, you're not going to be on your own. You're going to be, number 2 or number 3 as a PA tech working for another systems tech. So you're going to be learning from them all these different venues and all the problems with the different venues. You're not going to just find yourself in this unfamiliar scenario in a big, massive place on a tour that you're out of your comfort zone on. You'll do enough shows with someone else to learn how to work with this. So you now sort of know the sort of size of the venues. You've done these things before as a PA tech. Now you're on your own now. I would look for a couple of the biggest venues, and then look at all of the small venues. You need to know the sort of biggest venues in terms of height at the back. For instance, Milan is interesting because that's very, very, very tall. So it's not that deep, but it's very tall. So you need a lot of boxes just to do, box, 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 box. Whereas some of the smaller arenas that might be longer aren't a problem. Next, you need to know, you really get the designs of the stage to know where the side hangs are going to be. Are they going to be in a normal position, say 5 meters up stage of the main hang and 2 meters off stage, where you can work with them at 45 degrees and open them up quite well? Or do you need to get them close to the main hang? Or do they need to be the other side of scenery? So you need to know what's happening with the set design. And once you know those sorts of things, that's when you'll start to make the assessment of how many boxes you need. So you'd work from the biggest venues to count your boxes in the air. You'd know from speaking to the front of house engineer what sort of SPL they'll be working at. And for instance, placebo, we were 102, 103, 104, 105 sometimes at front of house at 35 to 40 meters away. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got that pressure every day with the same amount of headroom every day. So when we go from a big room to a small room, we don't want to put all the speakers in because you're going to end up with a very different sounding PA every day. You want to have the same amount of sort of power reserve every day. So the front of house engineer's got the master fader at the same place and it sounds the same. So we need to know what the biggest environment is so that we can plan to get that pressure at front of house for that guy and also know what it's going to be like everywhere else. And that's how many speakers you put on the truck. Next, you need to look at the smaller venues. Now, this is where it's very easy with Coda because typically, if Coda didn't exist, you would have a big, heavy box for your main system, a slightly smaller box for your side hang, but typically that slightly smaller box on your side hang is still quite heavy. So if you're doing a European tour, you might do some arena shows, and then you've got a little theatre here. And then you go to big arenas, little theatre. And the problem with that is sometimes you've got to carry another system on the truck to do the little theatre, where you've only got 500 kilos. But in Coda world, 500 kilos is 12 iRay. Or I think it's 11 or 12 iRay, which is our biggest box. So you now don't need to cover, you don't need to have an extra system on the truck for your theatres. Typically, if it's a big, I should know better than that. Typically, if it's a big European tour, you might have 270 hangs, which should be like double 6-inch box, double 8-inch box, something like that, maybe 8 of those aside. That would become your main system in a theatre. But odds are you've not got enough of it, so you need to hire more in, or it's not quite powerful enough for the theatres. So that's very interesting. And a little fact. On the last placebo tour, we took exactly the same amount of boxes in Coda World as we did the year before. So we had 16, as we did the year before when it wasn't Coda, it was a different brand. So in the main hang, we had 16 iRay with 4 of the V-Ray downfills. We had a centre hang of 6 V-Ray. We had 8 of the SC2 low frequency extensions flown behind, as you can see in this picture here. I think this might have been the script, but it's the same thing. And then to the side, more iRay. The placebo tour the year before, where it was a different brand of PA, we had to have another 24 of a smaller box, a smaller double 8-inch box on the truck for 3 of the theatre shows we did. And speaking to the production manager after the tour, he was really happy because he saved 56,000 euros in not having this extra truck, which was the extra space for the bigger speakers, and this extra PA for the whole tour. So it was a good 3 or 4 months, and it was a massive saving in truck costs, fuel costs, extra driver for not having a really big system. So that was quite quite telling. So, to answer your question, you'd always start with the big arenas, and then you must look at every small arena, every small venue as well, because also in small venues, it's a mixture of what you can do in terms of power. That's quite a big constraint. So you need to concentrate on that when it comes to planning.
Еще вопросы? По поводу Олимпийского все понятно, нет? I just remember the inn called me the night.
Yeah.
So you just... Что, если я на английском расскажу? It's around 12 o'clock night. He called me say, Ruslan, come on. Do you have enough IRA on the market? I say, yeah, you're just coming from St. Petersburg. In Sergi have a lot of IRA. So if it's possible to delivery from Moscow to St. Petersburg in the 12 hours. I say, yeah, it's possible, no problem. So probably we need it for Олимпийский, for placebo, because we have a balcony.
That's true.
And it's far, far away from the main stage.
Yeah.
I say, yeah, I mean, no problem, Nelly. So call me when you need it. So the next time he called me 2 o'clock in the night, because he flies the PA, he checks the PA. He go to 132 meter
Yeah.
for the last seat, and sound still there. So he called me say, don't worry, relax, enjoy the life, we don't need it. We have enough PA to
Yeah.
make Олимпийский.
So the Olympiski, that was 16. It was 16 or 18. I don't remember exactly. I'm pretty certain it was 16 IRA aside, with some SC2s flown behind, and it worked very well. We were at the limits of the PA at that point in time, but we still didn't need delays, and we still delivered a show that was probably 102. Nelly's going to kill me if I get these numbers wrong. It's probably about 102 dBA over 15 minutes at front of house, and it still had transients, snare drums, big toms, enormo kick drum. So it worked very well.
Как много зрителей было на этом шоу?
How many audience in the Олимпийский?
In that show?
I don't know. Lots. It was quite a lot. Ruslan, do you have any idea?
I remember just half of Олимпийский.
25,000?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more.
Yep.
I think it was probably around. I think it was probably 20 to 25,000. So, quite a few for when you consider that's quite not very many boxes for that many people, and everyone went away thinking it was great. So that was good.
Yeah, but I remember the good stuff. Me, Sergey, and Mr. Bobrov, so we go first to St. Petersburg, to arena.
Yeah.
Okay, so we see the rehearsal, we see the sound check, sound is fantastic. And after you go to Олимпийский, we go to Олимпийский and bring Vladimir Gubatov, and I think Yura Astafyev, so we bring some people there. And sound amazing. And after, the Svetley, the owner of Coda, invite us to the Hamburg. So we go fly to Hanover, have a few days in Hanover, and after sit to the bus and go to the Hamburg show.
Yeah.
It's another arena. But what I'm absolutely amazing, I see the guys staying with some measurement instrument. So I go to Nelly, to sound regisseur, to in. saying, what is guy doing here? So yeah, he's measuring. If I 3 times make mistake and play more than 95 dB, he switch off front of house. I say, are you joking? He said, no, no, I'm serious. So all the gigs we're hearing 95 dB. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, we're hearing 105, maybe a
Probably,
little bit
yeah.
more
Maybe a little bit
because
more.
he put more power.
I know
And
that.
the Olympiski we're
Yeah.
hearing, wow, it's fantastic, maybe 107. But when I hearing 95 dB,
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable. You know why? Because the people on the venue, he go with a suitcase with beer. And when you speak with these guys and to take a beer, you are absolutely comfortable. You have enough sound pressure, and he hearing you, I hearing him. So, like, atmosphere through the audience is absolutely comfortable. So now I have question. Can you explain for us? I think it's very interesting about the rules
Yeah.
regarding sound pressure
Yeah.
in Europe.
Okay.
Because we are sorry, we are on the live video, but normally when we work in Russia, we have no rules.
Yeah.
What does mean? The sound engineer and sound regisseur, he putting much as possible power,
Yeah.
and when you go out in the gigs, you're hearing like noise 3
Yeah.
days after the gigs
Not
in your
good.
ears.
Because that is hearing damage.
Yeah.
That
Can you
is-
explain
yeah.
how you work in Europe or all over the planet?
So yeah, it's very different everywhere in Europe. But 3 notable places. Okay, first the UK, where I'm from. There's no real. Okay, I'm not a solicitor. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know these things exactly correctly. I'm only using my memory. But in England, there's no real applicable laws for sound pressure at events. So what people do is they go to the nearest thing, which is noise in the workplace for like bar staff and construction. And that says that anything over 85 dBA, you need to start to think about protection. And anything over 88 dBA, you need to do something about protection. So you need to have earplugs and wear them. But because it's not, how to say, it's not the law, it's, you know, it's not completely applicable. You'll see bar staff and people will be wearing them. And that's good because you only get one set of ears. You can't just reset them. But it's not really applicable. However, at outdoor shows, you tend to see more stringent levels. Typically, you'd see something like 98 dBA at front of house over 15 minutes for just noise pollution and off-site and making sure that stages aren't interfering with each other. Now, I don't know these numbers exactly, but in Sweden, I think it's 95 dBA over 5 minutes, unless there's anyone under 12 years old in the audience, at which case it needs to be less than 90 dBA over 5 minutes. And I don't know those numbers exactly, but it's something like that. If there's young children, minors, in the audience, the limit goes much lower. So that's tricky. That's very tricky. Switzerland, it's the same. There's always very scary things written on riders, on venue regulations, all the documents you get before getting to a venue in Switzerland about you can't exceed this limit of 95 over 15 or something. And they always bring you a meter, but their own meter. But 95% of the time, the meter doesn't work, or it's not calibrated, or no one's policing it. And so it's a bit backwards. It's a bit, you sort of, where do you stand? Because you look at the meter and it will be saying it's 118 dB. But you know it's not 118 dB, it's 80 dB, so that's tricky. So I am all for SPL limits, because I've heard some things that have been so loud that they'd be damaging to people's hearing. And if you're paying money to go watch a show, you don't expect to have your hearing damaged. The other thing is, people go to shows, they might have some drinks, they're going to be slightly less conscious about hearing protection because they're having a good time. So if it was up to me, I would love to see a sensible A-weighted limit, and also a C-weighted limit, because the thing that's getting silly, in my opinion, at festivals these days is A-weighted limits. So if you have a limit at front of house of, say, 98 dB over 15 minutes, the subwoofer, the sub information is not going to affect the SPL meter. So you can have a show that's 92 dB, but with the subs in limit, like insanely loud, and the A-weighted meter is not paying any, doesn't give any regard to the sub. Couple that with the fact that it's really difficult these days to fly subs at a festival because that costs money. Why would people want to pay to fly subs when you could put them on the floor for free? But the thing about flying the subs is they still work as well. The flown sub is great. You're not really marmalising. You're not pummeling the people in the front row that are stood in front of the subs if they're flown. If there's a big stack of subs on the floor and someone's running at 135 dBc at front of house, but the A-weighted meter, that's the one that they're policing, is 95 dBA, you'll still have people that will have hearing damage. So the rules aren't restrictive enough. So I think there should be a realistic limit with C weighting as well as A weighting. And the next thing is, I have been in two situations in my life where I have had people who are the responsible people for the sound pressure, noise police you could call them, who have instructed me to turn it down and down and down, once to the point where I turned it off and it was still too loud, because they didn't understand that crowd noise isn't like the amplified music. The people were shouting, they were rioting and shouting, turn it up, and that was making the sound meter overread. So what's missing there is an education. That's not, there's no correlation between the sound coming out of the speaker and the number on the meter. So there needs to be a bit more intelligence there. And the next thing is, I think it would be better if this was... Okay, it's not possible to do this, but being really facetious about it, they always turn down front of house, even when the problem is not front of house, even if it's all the monitors and the side fills in the DJ booth. There was one time at another festival that I did where the side fills, the DJ booth, he had two double 18 subs and quite a big stack of line array that would be adequate for a small theatre next to him, left and right. And that was like going full power. And it was late at night and it was cold. Temperature was very low. There was no wind. That was causing a problem off-site, and it was making the meter overread at front of house. So I was instructed to turn the PA down and down and down to the point where it was off. The PA was muted, and we were still over the limit. The sound policeman can't control that, so that's where we ended up in a scenario where there was nothing. We'd come to something that we just couldn't deal with. What do we do in that scenario? If there's any repercussions, if people make complaints from off-site, they go off the numbers, the stored logged numbers in the SPL meter. And the SPL meter can't differentiate between, the noise from the PA, the noise from the crowd, the noise from the stage. And in this case, it was the noise from the stage was making the meter overread, and there was nothing that could be done about it. So it's really tricky. Something needs to happen because we can't damage people's hearing, but it's not as simple as putting a number on a piece of paper, because there's too many ways around that, and it's not real.
Раз. I have a question. I have two questions. First, what is your main preferred setup of subs? Left, right, or arc?
Left, center, right.
Oh, left, center, right.
End fire.
So the question is about some of our sound guys.
Yeah.
Don't like arc subs because they say that arc subs have a bad impulse response.
Yep.
So they prefer left-right in this way. So what do you think? So
I agree. But it all depends on the artist, and some artists don't like sub, so you've got to do something about that. So cardioid is the go-to thing, as is end fire. Then not placing them under the stage or near the stage, getting them away from them. So there's too many variables, but I am a fan of left-right primarily with end fire. So that's the best case for rejection and the best case for flattest magnitude response out front. Best case for impulse response, but also the worst case for power rally, because the left-right, you obviously get the cancellation either side of the main lobe. So that's where the center sub comes in. Typically, I would run the center sub at a higher crossover point, and not have it at 0 dB, because you'll start to hear it. You'll hear it straight away if there's lots of them. Just to fill in closer to the stage, fill in that power rally. So typically, numbers that spring to mind is when I've done 8 aside of the SCPs. If I've got 4 SCPs in the middle, I'll have them down at about 3, 4, 5 dB below the stacks of 8, even though there's half of them. I'd have them at the same time as the main, as the left-right subs. I wouldn't put any extra time on them, and that fills in the power rallies without really affecting the tonality out front. But to answer your question about lines, I find a line of subs, an arc line of subs, to get the same pressure, you need a lot more of them. You need lots of them, from my experience. Then outside, it's quite easy to simulate what they're going to do in software. It's very difficult to simulate how you're going to perceive that impulse, that transient off them. But as soon as you take that line and you put it inside, you're putting it in an environment where the wavelengths that are coming out of these subs are comparable to the dimensions of the room. And it can be, you can put exactly the same setup in different rooms, so day after day after day after day, and it can be amazing, meh, rubbish, brilliant, good. There's no consistency there, and I would always try to get something more consistent for the front of house engineer. So that's why I tend to always go with left, right, and then if we can, some in the center, because most of the calculation programs out there that do the prediction are completely free field and anechoic, so you can't predict what is it going to sound like today in this room. There's no way of knowing until you build it, and you might build it and find out it's terrible, and then at that time it's too late. Sound check has to happen, and all the local crew have gone, so you're stuck with it. You've got to go with it. Sometimes ticket sales mean you can't put them in front of the stage, so you'd have to put them underneath, but then some stages you can't put them underneath. Sometimes, for instance, one artist, we had subs in the center to reduce the power rally, but when the artist saw, because they didn't like sub on stage, But when the artist sees the subs, they think, oh, that's a lot of sub. And you show them, look, when I mute them, you get more. And when I unmute them, they get less. But then still they'll be, oh, no, I don't want to see them because I don't like sub. So sometimes science, you get science and you go like that. And you just have to be, just do whatever you're told. Because sometimes sound isn't the most important thing. It's some other problem.
Тема сабвуферов, 360 градусов площадки.
So go further the theme of subwoofers.
Yeah.
Do you work for 300? Do you have experience to work 360 degrees?
Once. I did but it wasn't very much. It was a theatre show, a comedy show in the round. So this was 186 speakers with 3.5 miles of soccer pecs. So it was a big system. And the sub was tricky, very tricky. The only way that I know that you could two ways that I know that you could do it, but I've not done either way because it was a comedy show. We didn't fly subs. We had a couple of subs under the stage just for the song as he walks in and the song as he walks off. But the ways that I've seen it done that apparently work quite well is Thomas Mundorf's TM array in the center, in the actual center of the room, where you're creating like imagine a stone dropping in a pond. The wave goes out equally, but you're putting a lot of weight in a very small area. So sometimes I believe that's tricky to do because typically the roof in an arena is divided up into bays, like 5 meter by 5 meter bays or 10 meter by 10 meter bays, and there'll be a structural limit within that bay. So you can't put more than 3 tons in that bay or 10 tons in that bay or even more. So I believe that using that system, it was brilliant. But sometimes in some of the rooms, it was tricky to get that enough weight capacity in that place. So you'd have to either put a grid in, more truss, and spread the weight out over further points, over a bigger distance, or just have less boxes. That's one way. Another way you could do it would be with flown cardioid setups, flown end fires. So there's a couple of examples I know where they're either using an inherently cardioid box, doing subs around going outwards, or doing a cardioid setup with more than one source, multiple sources, and doing a physical end fire in the roof. And I really like that. I prefer, on the floor at least, I prefer a physical end fire to a cardioid, a phase gradient approach, because you see, yes, it takes up more space, but you can do more with it. It's more flexible. So there are a couple of ways of doing it, but I've not really done one of those, luckily.
Еще вопросы есть специфические? So, but what you prefer, the fly subs or staying in front of the stage?
Both. So I like firstly, the main hang of speakers to be as long as possible to get the vertical control down to the lowest frequency, to get the projection and the throw of low frequency to the back of the room. Because, let's face it, it's easy to get, with all this amazing technology, it's really easy to get mid and high frequencies well to the back of the room now. We're not having to fight with distance and throw because the waveform is so flat. But the problem is maintaining that tonal balance. If you put small angles to get to the back of a room, you can find it will sound a bit more bright, a bit more 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K at the back of the room compared to the low frequency and the low mid at the front of the room. So that's why I like to get the main hang as long as possible to control that decay of low frequency over distance, and fly the subs as well if you can. So flying the subs, like in this picture here, you can see the SC2s, they're not subs, these are low frequency units going, it's falling off, don't panic. I'm an amateur expert. Yeah. These go from, say, 35, 40 up to 160, so they're not just subs, they're giving you lots of weight and impact. But there's an overlap there between the low frequency coming out of those SC2s behind and the I-ray in front. So that's an end fire in the air. So that's a cardioid, that's a end fire cardioid setup. Flying them means you get that power and that punch to the back of the room without getting high pressure at the barrier. But doing that, you end up with a null, not a null, what's the word? You can walk to the front to the barrier and not know if the subs are on, because you've got a long line and they're really, the waveform, the beam has sort of come down and it's projecting more and you're underneath it now. You can't, yes, you know they're on, but you're not getting the impact from them. So that's why I then have some subs on the floor just to fill in the first 15, 20 meters. But you don't need anywhere near as much then. And you're not hurting people on the front row. So I would do both if I could do both. Stay.
С буферами по этой картинке стало понятно. А теперь относительно низкочастотной области вот самого массива. То есть он очень длинный, мы очень большой загиб имеем внизу. Вот low frequency beam control.
С сабвуферами я понял. Не, без сабвуфера. Я так понял, что он подвесные сабвуферы говорил. Про сам массив очень длинный, чтобы контролировать этот. Я просто про сабвуфер подумал. Да, а это еще больше делать. Да. Все.
Коллеги, еще есть вопросы?
In our country, a lot of sound engineers use ground stacks.
Yeah.
And very often we can see a lot of photos in our group in Facebook when people six Cara in zero angles. What do you think so?
Wow.
Yeah,
I've
three
seen it.
or three Cara only ground stack
Concave as well.
in zero angles.
Zero angles.
Yes.
Zero angles should
It's
be used.
a very usual situation in our country. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with.
Well, I can't I can't speak on behalf of L-Acoustics. I can speak on behalf of Coda, but I think my friends at L-Acoustics would agree that 0 degree angles are designed for throwing a long distance. So they're not really designed for near field. And what that sounds like is something that's too low. So because it's too low, what choice do you have but to put small angles in? If you can get it higher up, you can then point it down. And because you're pointing it down, you can then put angles in it. Don't put the small angles at the bottom and the big angles at the top. It's got to be like a J, where you've got that natural attenuation from small angles at the top, throwing a distance, to bigger angles at the bottom, naturally attenuating to where you've got someone with their head 4 feet away. So get it as high as you can, as safely as you can. I've done some bonkers ground stacks. I think we've all done crazy ground stacks before, but I certainly remember a few ground stacks where we've had to use extra ballast to hold it stable. But it works. Just get it as safe as you can and as high as you can, so you don't need to use 0 degrees or 1s or 2s.
So it's very often mistake of some people.
Sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you've not got anything to stack it on. The roof is too low. You've not got enough speakers anyway. You've not got any local crew. So how do you lift it up when you're on your own? So there are a lot of, as with everything, sound engineering is dealing with people, compromising, and 5% sound engineering. So it's compromise and trying to find the balance, trying to find the right way of doing things. But yeah, it does make me very sad when you see a concave ground stack or a ground stack at knee height, all at 0 degrees, pointing up. So.
You, where your education to be, and how you make the idea to start to be a sound engineer?
Oh.
Because, you know, I tell you why I ask you this question, because normally when I speak with people from the event industry,
Yeah.
or rock and roll industry, all the sound people, like we say,
Yeah.
he is not really happy.
Right.
Because lighting people make more money, and he is renting more expensive than sound system.
Yeah.
Video people make more money than lighting people, because his LED screen is more expensive. That's mean in the mentality of the people, he make more money.
Yeah.
Okay, so
what we're trying to say,
without sound,
but
no
what we're
gigs.
saying
But
there is that video people are the cleverest, right?
yeah, I heard this from my friend who is a sound engineer, but so the lighting and even the riggings. Okay,
Yeah.
he's more rich and he have more salary and so on. So this is question to you: how you develop the idea to start to be a sound engineer? And as first question, and second questions, in your country,
Yeah.
how is it level the sound people against lighting people and video people?
It's exactly as you describe. To answer your second question first, I don't know exact numbers because I've only ever worked as a sound person. But you hear, that you have people that are paid more than you at different roles. But you've got to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Because if the reason you're doing this is to make money, then get a different job, because you will lose your social life, you will lose contact with friends and family for massive chunks of time, and just working just to make money, nah, that's not for me, at least anyway. The reason to work is to have fun, and I have fun playing with massive stereo systems, massive hi-fis. I think I don't see playing with lights and video as fun, but then again, I'm not a video or lighting person. I'd find it very boring, but then I think if you asked a video or a lighting person about playing with sound, they'd find that very boring, which is why there's different people doing different jobs. So you've got to want to do it. You don't default to being a sound engineer because you can't do video or lights. I'd say that video people want to do video, lighting people want to do lighting, sound people want to do sound. So that's part of the job, is maybe, no, you're not paid as much as the video director, but then again, the video director's not getting as paid as much as the artist. So it's, everyone needs to just do what they want. And the first question, how did I get into this? I suppose when I was very young, I was working in a theatre because I had a friend there and I was bored, and so that meant that I could put off doing homework till a bit later, and that's when I was in high school, and I ended up getting casual work there. Then went to uni, did a music technology, audio systems, Bachelor of Science degree at Huddersfield University. That was great fun. then I went to Adlib and started as an apprentice. So, yes, there's a progression there. So that's how it happened. But there's loads of different ways. You can go through education and getting qualifications, or you can go and do it. I think for this field, the best advice I could give would be, if there was a young kid that wanted to get into this, would be just check you want to do this, because it's very, very different to a normal 9-to-5 job. You can be away for 9 months at a time. So make sure you're okay with that. And secondly, go work at a rental company. Go to a hire company. If you want to get into live sound, go work for a hire company and learn the equipment, learn how to use it, learn how to fix it, and get in that way, and you'll find that you will get work eventually. So that's probably the most surefire way of getting work than going and... Yes, qualifications are important, but I think there's more of a skill of having understanding about the equipment and how and why, rather than being told how and why. You've got to learn for yourself. So in an environment where you can make mistakes but not really make mistakes. So if you go work at a hire company, you're not going to be put out on a massive tour on your own in the first week. You're going to do little shows and then do slightly bigger shows more important, where you're the third person on the crew, and then you'll find that you'll start to get up to being the number one person on the team. So from the system delivery point of view.
Sound engineer.
Yeah.
He always, even this is small gigs.
Yeah.
He's staying together with sound regisseur.
He's what, sorry?
The guy, so the two people always in Europe or in UK.
Yeah.
On the front of house, sound engineer and mixing console guy.
System engineer and front of house engineer.
Yeah.
For virtually all arena shows, yeah. For most theatre shows, yes. And for a few theatre shows and some smaller shows, not really. But for the bigger stuff, definitely. Because the stakes are quite high now. There's a lot of money riding on gigs. Can you imagine if you're doing a show in an arena and something went wrong and you had to cancel the show because a processor died or something? You really need to have all these backup plans prepared and ready to execute, so that if the show doesn't have to stop because of you, you need to have all these things thought out. And if you're chained to a mixing desk, mixing the band, there's not a chance that you can go and periodically, every 15 minutes, go and check amplifier worlds and walk around and make sure, well, the room changes with people walking in, temperature, humidity, different people. You need to tailor the system to the environment, let the front of house engineer know how it's different at front of house compared to everywhere else in the room, the average. And sometimes you have to tell the front of house engineer that, I know it sounds great here, but can you do this? And because it will be better for more people. So you need that relationship with them, but that's the main reason you need two people. One for catching problems before they arise, and then secondly for ensuring coverage and making sure everyone gets a good show.
So sometimes you're fighting with front of house guy who stay mixing console.
Fighting, okay.
I cannot imagine you go to in and say, come on, you do this shitty guitar, do like that, do like that, do like that.
Only once, but it wasn't a fight. Only once in my short career did I find myself in a situation where it wasn't great, but luckily it was only a few shows. but very, very, very rarely. But who's to say that I wasn't in the wrong? You don't know. But I've been very, very lucky to work with some amazing front of house guys. It could have gone a lot differently. I could have hated it had I worked with some people that weren't so good. So I'm very lucky in that respect.
Ну что, господа, вопросы? Чего вы сидите зажатые? Жарко, что ли, стало?
Hello.
Hi.
I have two questions. First, what your favorite tracks for sound check? Well, you know, when you complete your system and check how it's good. And question number two, you understand? Yes. First,
So the first question is, what am I looking for in a sound check?
what tracks you play?
Or what tracks?
Tracks,
Well,
yes,
actual tracks.
music, or maybe sounds.
Yes, so the most important thing that you can learn is your own voice through a microphone. So get a microphone you like. 58, Beta 58, you can't beat them. Yeah, SM58, Beta 58. Get one of those and listen to your voice and know your voice, because you've got that with you all the time. And you can make lots of different crazy sounds with your voice and you can hear what's happening. So that's the most important thing. Yes, I've got music I listen to. I suppose that's mostly for listening to tonal variation around an arena, because yes, you can get your EQ out and make it sound brilliant at front of house, but that's not what we want to do. We want to try and make it the same everywhere. As I know that's what everyone wants, is the same everywhere, but you've got to be realistic. It's going to sound different 100 meters away than it is to 1.8 meters away from the stage where you're at the barrier. So I play some music tracks, which I can show you later. Some of the tracks I've got, and I use those mostly just for listening to how the room changes as you walk about. And also, at that time, you're taking a computer with you and listening to the different elements of the system, checking you've plugged it in right, checking they're all working properly, and checking where they're covering. Because you've got a laser in the top box, and you're seeing where that's hitting, but that laser might be knocked by a millimeter, and a millimeter of change over 100 meters, a 1 degree of change over 100 meters would be 6 degrees, something like that. It would be quite different. So as you're playing music, you walk around and listen to that. But the most useful thing I find is a multi-track of the show the night before, or even a multi-track of a good show. If you find that you're doing a tour and the tour's the same every day, it's the same songs in the same order every day, and you find you have a particularly good show, just keep that multi-track, because you don't want a thing called digital creep to come in, where you change it, and then 3 weeks later, it's nothing like it was at the beginning, for better or worse, I don't know. But it's always good to have a good reference to go back to. And yes, it's tricky. It's more representative in the bigger spaces with a band that's on IEMs, all IEM monitors, no wedges, and quiet stages. As soon as you have a loud stage with monitors, side fills, loud guitars, loud bass guitar on a hollow stage, multi-tracks become a little bit less interesting. But if you can multi-track it, then do so, because that's the best. But your voice, learn your voice. Yeah.
Okay, and second question about what system prefer Radiohead?
What system on Radiohead? That is this guy called Jim Warren is front of house. Marco is the system tech, and they are on K1, K2, I believe. They're on an AVB network with LA12X amplifiers, and historically it's been K1 on LA8s as well. So.
Еще есть вопросы?
Может быть, немножко расскажет он, какими инструментами, какими измерительными инструментами он пользуется. Да, то есть, ну, понятно, что большие площадки, измерения во многих точках, может быть, какие-то радиосистемы измерительные, что-то.
The question is about what equipment you use in your tuning system,
Yeah.
in your for tune system. How many mics in what places? No, some words about your
Yeah.
equipment, software.
So I was using a software. I use Smart 8 for phase response. I quickly, with that, would align the main to the flown sub and that entity, the floor sub, and then I'd shut it down and I wouldn't use it again. I then use a free piece of software called Room EQ Wizard. That's amazing. It's really, really good. It's free. You should try it. You should get it and play with it. It's very good. That it's donationware, so you should, if you like it, give the guy some money that wrote it. Very, very good piece of software. So I use that for magnitude, impulse response, and spectrograph. So you can see what things are happening over time. So you can see frequency in this axis, time in this axis, and energy with the different colors. Microphone-wise, I had a Earthworks M30BX microphone. So that's an Earthworks mic with a battery in it. Because if you have I had a Electrosonics HM series transmitter receiver. If you turn phantom power on the transmitter, you get 2 hours before the battery's flat on the transmitter, which is a shame. So if you don't use phantom power and have a microphone with a battery in it, you get a lot more use out of it. You don't need external antennas on that Electrosonics unit. The little plug-in antennas on the panel are brilliant, even in big stadiums. You need to check that the frequency you're using is completely fine, it's legal, and you're not taking out someone's IEMs or handhelds, so you need to coordinate with the RF guy. I would use one of them. And I wouldn't measure subs with it, because there is a high-pass filter. The lowest you can put the high-pass filter down to on that system is 35 hertz. And yes, if that's your point of reference, that's okay, if you do all the measurements with that. But typically with subs, I'd be measuring near front of house. I'd be looking at 2/3 of the way on the floor in an arena, 2/3 of the way down the room, on axis to the main hang and the subs. So I would have the mic on the floor, so to get rid of floor bounce. And with that, I'd be using a cable. I'd be using a copper cable. The more you can do with a cable, the quieter you can measure. Also, mic preamp. My favorite mic preamp ever for system work and listening to music and for anything. There's a company called Prism Sound, a British company called Prism Sound, and I've got one of their Lyra 2 units, and that's very good. You can turn the gain up to 65 dB, and you don't hear any noise. There's no hiss, there's no noise. You're listening to the room around you. So because of that, on a massive tour, where there's lots of departments working, lots of other people making the stage, lighting guys, you don't want to annoy them with music and loud pink noise and sweeps. The more you can do timing-wise with like very quiet pink noise, the better. So if you have a really good quality mic preamp, you can tune and time align at very, very quiet levels. So, hey, thank you. That's not vodka, is it? I can't do any more. So, Room EQ Wizard is great. Smart 8 is very good. It's great. I love. There's so many good things out there now. The ICEMCon stuff is really good as well. ICEMCon microphones. But I would say, if you're doing lots of shows, get a mic calibrator as well, and get a microphone that you can measure louder than the signal you're doing. So, for instance, the reason I say that is if you get a Behringer ECM 8000 microphone, yes, it's okay for time aligning, but look at what it does with pressure. Get another microphone and measure the system at 98 dBA, and then turn it up to 105 dBA, and look at what the Behringer's doing. It doesn't give you the full. It compresses a bit in the mic preamp inside the microphone. So get a good quality microphone and a calibrator, and use your ears as well. More important, because the audience aren't listening to the show with a computer screen. They're using their ears. So.
Я чувствую, вы все хотите пива, потому что вы сидите и молчите. Такое прям грустно. Поэтому предлагаю сделать в нашей трансляции... Что мы... Ну...
System under the balcony. On the big
Some words about tuning.
Sure. Sure. So, like in a big theatre or... Yeah. So, in an ideal world, you would have delays everywhere. But this isn't an ideal world, and you have to be in and out in a day. If it's a theatrical installation, yeah, great. Spend 3 months doing the installation. But on a day-to-day basis, you typically try to fly the main array at a height where you can get under the balcony. So you need to look at the 2D cut view of the arena, of the theatre, and look at where the boxes are hitting and make sure you get underneath them. If the room is curved like this, then you can consider pointing the arrays across as well. Because where your array is, if your arrays are flat out, this bit of the balcony here can be masked, and you might have to bring it down very low to get underneath it. But if you point the arrays across and fire across like this, now this one's got a much better chance of getting under the balcony from the other side. So, yes, that can cause issues with gain before feedback on the downstage edge if there's a lot of these microphones or labs or something. But typically, 9 times out of 10, you've got a singer with a microphone like that. So, it's not a problem.
Not about this. About some, under the balcony you have a low boost some.
Yeah.
And this is masking the high.
Yeah.
And what you do if you have not so big or big angle?
Yeah. All you can do is put a small angle there. That's the only thing you can do. You can boost mid and high frequencies in that zone, but in these rooms, typically, there's as many people, if not more people, listening off-axis from a box than there are in front. So if you're making it perfect in front here with a massive HF boost to get over the low-mid build-up, you can be making it really top-heavy for people at the side that are listening to the same box. So it's all compromise and balance, but no, there's not much you can do. And at the top of arenas, top of theatres as well, where the roof is narrowing as you're walking up the seats and you're getting into the roof, there's not a lot you can do. If it was a theatrical installation, you would have budget for acoustic treatment, so you can put some acoustic absorption on the roof, but not in touring world, I'm afraid. Oh, if you're touring, have a case with drape in it. That's my favourite thing. If you're doing a tour of theatres or arenas, another case on the truck, just have some thick drapes, like curtain material, like black thick material, just in sections with some string, ratchet straps, just on the truck, because you'll find there'll be some venues where there will be really annoying reflections, or you might do a show at a festival where you're outside in a front of house tower and there's plastic walls, like plastic sheets hanging up, and they're very it makes it very confusing to listen to. So all these quick reflections happening near your head can be quite confusing. And it makes it a bit louder in front of the house, and that's where the measurement mic is for the SPL. So if you can have a case of drape with you, that's good as well to help. It won't help in a theatre with low mid build up, but yeah.
How you prefer to do the center cluster?
Center cluster?
Yeah.
As low as possible.
Angle.
As low as possible, which is never possible because it's always a sightline problem. So it will be a problem. I'd love to have it as low as you can, because then in terms of time, it's in the same sort of time domain as the main hangs. You're not having to put delay on the main hang to push it up to the same time as the center. But that's not possible because you've got people paying money to see the artist. And if you're sat up in the top, you don't want to be looking at a hang of speakers. So you have to have them higher. Typically, I quite often recently, I've been having the angles backwards on the center. So at the barrier, having, 2s and 3s, going up to 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s. So an upside down line array, so an upside down J, because you sort of want it to fade in as you get to the barrier. And so there's a couple of reasons you'd be flying a center hang. The first would be to cover that triangle in the middle that you can't get with your left and right array. The other is if the artist doesn't want any front fills on the stage. I once worked with an artist, mentioning no names, that told me to get rid of all the front fills and all the lighting guide to get rid of all of the lights because the front audience members couldn't see his shoes. So we had to get rid of all of the front fills. So that was bad because there was no audio in the middle, but they could see his shoes, so that was good. So yeah, upside down angles. Try that sometime. It's quite good. Yeah.
Еще вопросы есть, коллеги?
Может быть, немножко про Coda аудио поговорим, и наверняка человеку есть что рассказать того, что нет, скажем так, в открытом доступе, о технологиях применяемых, что-то интересное, какие-то фишечки, которые, допустим, поподробнее интереснее было бы узнать про Servo Drive Controlled Subwoofers.
Okay, so what I like to do, I like to stop.
Yeah.
Okay, because the stops live video to the internet, and after to have 10 minutes for coffee and beer, and after go back and we discuss about not a commercial question, and who is very private and very secret. Okay. And we don't show this video to the internet, right? So thank you for people who watching us. Thank you, George.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, Internet.